Hello friends, this is the Voice of Europe coming to you from the Press Project via the Real News Network. I'm Christos Datsios. Today, we're going to try and shed some light to a phenomenon which is becoming increasingly apparent in Europe. After several years of economic crisis, topped by the recent explosive rise of the refugee influx from Africa, there are clear signs that the European voters have started to make more and more radical political choices. For decades, Europe was enjoying a healthy rate of financial growth, and the overall feeling was that its countries, particularly those belonging to the Eurozone, were part of a financially strong and secure conglomeration. It may or may not have been the truth, but this feeling was making voters choose moderate political representatives who were moving around the center of the political spectrum. In 2009, all this changed, and the issue of international debt became central in the political discourse of Europe. The vulnerable countries had to undertake dire measures leading to austerity. In some cases, like that of Greece, Portugal and Ireland, financial hardship hit large portions of the population, inflating unemployment, reducing the value of home ownership and causing severe cutbacks in the funding by the state of services which the average citizen enjoyed. Countries with less financial weaknesses have not suffered that kind of shock, but wages have stopped rising at previous rates, while youth unemployment, or the lack of quality jobs for the young, is a problem everywhere around Europe. Besides the financial troubles, the numbers of migrants trying to come into Europe from several poverty-stricken countries of Africa and Asia have been inflated by millions of war refugees fleeing from Syria and other countries, where a 3-year war has led to the accumulation of millions of desperate souls running away from barbaric ISIS. It is not the goal of this particular show to go into the actual reasons behind the rise of ISIS and other fundamentalist Muslim groups, but it can be said that from its part, Europe has done too little too slow and is now faced with an unprecedented wave of migrants trying to enter. These two aspects seem to have greatly affected the feeling of Eurozone citizens towards the EU. In France, in the recent regional elections, just 3 weeks after the Paris attacks, the far-right nationalistic party of Marine Le Pen, the Front National, reached percentages around 30% in the first round. The numbers cannot be ignored, and they do show a turn of the French people towards a Euro-spectacle, if not downright Euro-negative, nationalistic Christian party. In Portugal, after a long turmoil, the government has been given to a coalition of parties ranging from centre-left to communism. In Greece, the winner of the last 2 elections was Syriza, a party whose name includes the words radical left. In the UK, Jeremy Corbyn, a man who draws his ideology from the most traditional parts of the European left, has become the leader of the Labour Party. And we shouldn't overlook the existence of the nationalist Nigel Farage and UKIP. In Spain, the Podemos, a movement that started from the dismayed citizens who were demonstrating at the streets, has become an increasingly influential political party. Even in countries where those two crises have hit mildly, Germany, Austria, Holland, the rates of the far-right, xenophobic, Eurosceptical parties have risen to numbers which were unthinkable a decade earlier. The countries of Eastern Europe also show an alarming empowerment of the extreme right, while the reaction to the waves of desperate migrants is downright shameful. Today we're going to ask Paul Mason about this radicalization of European politics. Paul has written several books, his latest being Post-Capitalism, A Guide to Our Future. He has now completed his documentary, This is a Coup, which investigates what really happened in the negotiations between Greece's left government of Syriza and the country's creditors, the other members of the Eurozone and the IMF. Hello, Paul. Thank you for joining us. My first question concerns the political radicalization of Europe. Voters choosing either left or far-right governments, and in any case supporting parties which are far from moderate. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, look, it's no mystery that after 5 years of economic stagnation, you're going to get political radicalization. We have to remember that the Eurozone and the euro currency has become quite manifestly a machine for creating stagnation and for destroying jobs. This is the kind of soil, this is the surface which economic conditions are creating for the political radicalization. We also have to see the French result, and I don't think just in the light of the Paris bombing. The French result was always going to be close to mid 20% for the Front National, because the Front National has cleaned up its act. Everybody outside France sees this remnant of this hard right, ultra racist, fascist, originating organization. But what you don't see on the ground is the way the Front National completely mirrors old social democracy. That is, what it campaigns about on the ground are things that social democracy used to campaign about.
Paul, sorry, but are you saying that they're using the rhetoric of the left?
Well, they're not just using the rhetoric of the left, they're using the issues that the left built itself upon. And if you were opposed to globalization and to Europe, to the European Union in the way the Front National is, you can actually offer people concrete answers. You can say, look, we do this, we close the borders, we end, the euro, ultimately we leave Europe, and we can pursue a national interest that, they believe, and large numbers of French people obviously believe, could deliver results. The challenge, let's think about the challenge for the far left in a minute, but the challenge for social democracy is to answer this question. It does not want to answer, how does globalization, how does the Eurozone deliver social justice? And until you can answer that question, all kinds of rhetorical attacks on the far right are not going to be able to defeat it. Because the far right is moving into the territory that social democracy has vacated, because social democracy believes that the euro, the Eurozone, the European institutions can be, quote unquote, democratized. Well, until they begin to deliver to ordinary people, people in small French towns, and let's remember it's not the majority, but it's a large minority, 28%. People in these towns are thinking, I don't have time to wait for the Eurozone to democratize. I don't have time for the problems that the Front National play upon in people's minds to be solved long term by the reform of Europe. I would rather they were solved in the short term. And the Front National is offering them a short term answer, which of course, like all radical right politics, is a chimera. I think that's a Greek word. It's chimeric. It doesn't even have existence. But people will vote for something that is impossible, that sounds plausible, rather than something that they know is impossible, which is the democratization of Europe.
Paul, we've seen that in the cases where people voted for the left, like Syriza in Greece, the government then tried to play in the field of the Eurozone within the euro, and it lost.
Yeah. Well, look, personally, I don't think it was a mistake to try to play within the field of the Eurozone, as you put it, especially if Hollande, Renzi and Obama are telling you privately, as they told Varoufakis and Tsipras, we will make sure you can never be thrown out of the euro, that you have a solid negotiating position. If the Chinese come to you and say, we'll lend you money, if the Russians come to you and say, we'll lend you money, what nobody realized was how much political capital Germany was prepared to burn to destroy Syriza. That's what nobody realized. So I don't think that we have this kind of fixed thing forever historically, the euro, which must always impose utter catastrophe on Greece. It was a negotiation and it was a fight, but the fight is over. Well, it's kind of over. It's round one of the fight is over, and round one of the fight was lost. And you know what? I think people all over Europe are drawing conclusions from that. They're drawing conclusions from the way the European Commission intervened into the referendum. Those of us who lived through it, you lived through it, I lived through it. You know, it's easy to forget as you live through it, the detail. But when you stand back, as I'm doing in the documentary that comes out next week, I see now that intervention by the Commission as a crucial moment. When people all over Europe said, hey, hold on a minute, who elected you? Who gave you, Juncker, Prime Minister of the biggest tax haven, the right to tell us which way to vote? We filmed outside the Commission HQ in central Athens where people tried to storm it. And we see, I think that anger that was in people's eyes then has been kind of picked up like a little burning flame in a lot of European countries. And then when they see Portugal, the left government, albeit it's a broad left government, they see the extrajudicial power, i.e. the presidency, brought to bear to try and stop that, explicitly because it endangers austerity. Okay, amazing admission from the Portuguese president. Again, this drip feeds through. People are not idiots. They watch the news and they see evidence week by week accumulated as to the undemocratic nature of the entire project. And that's what, if you ask me, what is new over the summer and winter and autumn of 2015 is not reflected very well in the mainstream media. This renewed skepticism and realization by broad masses of people that the Euro project, and not just the Euro project, the European Union may be driving itself towards a much more critical moment than many of the elite actually expect to happen.
Paul, you're releasing the first part of your documentary next week, and I know that you have strived to publish it before the Spanish elections. There are many upcoming elections all over. There is Spain, the English referendum, even the USA. Why did you want to publish it now?
Yeah, look, there are two things that I think everybody can learn from the first series of government. And in the interviews, both in the documentary and in the big articles I'm going to be writing around that documentary, I think those two lessons are fairly clear. And one is that Europe, not just the Eurozone, but the European Union, is rapidly becoming an arena where the rule of law does not, I wouldn't say it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist at the critical level. Okay, Varoufakis tells us, he told us in a public meeting in London, that, when he challenged the Eurogroup and asked them for a legal opinion at a certain point during the negotiations, the opinion came back that the Eurogroup has no status in law. It doesn't exist legally. Now, if you add that to the fact that, we are now seeing Schengen ripped up, we are seeing the Dublin treaties effectively ignored, we are seeing Greece told to allow Frontex to run the Greek border. What European people are seeing is, in a way you don't even see in America, they're beginning to see an executive where acting only where it can, only where, people are making reality, and it doesn't matter what the law and the rules are. The Germans, on July 12th, 13th, with regard to Greece, said for 5 years, Greece can't leave the Eurozone, and then on the back of an envelope, they arrived with the proposal, Greece must leave the Eurozone. This is like the Holy Roman Empire. This is like the Holy Roman Empire worked because of force. Force was applied from the top, and it trickled down through, effectively, non-democratic structures, which were the local, what they were called electorates, small duchies, small kingdoms. That's what it's becoming. Now, can we change that? Yes. And I think it has to be at two levels. One, the level of Europe. You have to insist that if treaties exist, that if treaties are there, then they apply. It's no good the Germans saying, let's rip up Dublin 3, but then let's rip up Schengen, and then let's rip up the rules of the Eurozone. You can't have that because the people of Europe didn't vote to join a kind of European kingdom based on power. They voted to join one based on the so-called acquis, the rules, which up to now everybody thought were inviolable.
I see. Paul, we spoke about several European countries, but I would like to grasp the opportunity and ask you to elaborate on Jeremy Corbyn, the new leader of Labour in England. And if he manages to create a new left and come in power, what will this mean for Europe, given that Britain is not part of the Eurozone?
I think there's two problems here. The first problem is Corbyn is not a new kind of left. Sat at the back bench of the British Labour Party, voting against everything, quite happy to be a happy rebel, and for years. I think it's only the fact that a new movement came along and used Corbyn to express itself. We've seen something like 200,000-300,000 people join the Labour Party, in the process of Corbyn's movement. This is bigger than all the Greek parties put together. These are the new members of Labour. They're mainly young. They're not mainly traditional left, Trotskyists or anarchists, although there are some powerful voices there from Trotskyism and anarchism joining. but they're the same kind of people that you find young journalists on Avgi or young journalists at the Press Project or on Propaganda. They're just young, salariat, precarious people. Now, Corbyn, I don't think yet really understands what their priorities are. Corbyn is he kind of expresses them in the way Syriza expressed the 2011 movement. It kind of said, okay, yeah, fine, we like you, but it never, it can draw energy from it, but it can drive the wave, but it can never become the wave. Now, the second thing is with Corbyn in Britain, yes, Britain is not in the Eurozone, but remember, the Eurozone was just one obstacle that a left government was going to face in Greece. We all know them. It was going to be the Eurozone, it was going to be the deep state, and ultimately it was going to be the enraged middle classes who we saw on the streets from the 18th of June onwards, which I think were a big factor in disorientating many of the traditional Greek left. Now, in Britain, we don't have the Eurozone, but we have if you think you have a deep state, we have the oldest deep state in the world. Yes. We're only now finding out things that went on in the 1970s. I've been writing about this recently. But we have a state that has journalists under surveillance. It openly, it declares its right to have journalists under surveillance. We have a state that, as recently as 5-10 years ago, sent secret policemen into very innocuous, moderate campaigns to not only be undercover, but to marry and have children with the activists as part of the undercover operation. So, Jeremy Corbyn, if he ever takes power, will have a lot of that to put up with, and then on top of that, we have a massive. If you think the Yes campaign, the Yes campaign is nothing compared to the plebeian mass reactionary potential you see in Britain, because going back to the Front National, we have all kinds of movements in Britain that are not overtly fascist and would never be fascist, but ultimately are, incredibly strong reactionary movements that, if Corbyn became Prime Minister, there is no doubt in my mind that a case would be made, as they attempted to make against Harold Wilson in the mid-1970s, that he is a quote-unquote security risk and cannot be Prime Minister. So, look, it's amazing for me, who studied, I studied the 1930s at university. It's amazing to me how like the 1930s, early 1930s. I'm not saying this is fascism. I'm saying it's like the Weimar Republic. Some of the Weimar conditions are emerging all over Europe. And what's the problem? It's not even the Eurozone. The problem is the crisis of neoliberalism. It's a model that's broken. It doesn't work. It has an elite that will not accept this. And that elite, I'm afraid, will go to the bitter end, fighting for their right to impose austerity and inequality and poverty on the masses, not just of Europe, but of America. And Donald Trump, who knew that the right in America, which is so obsessed with the US Constitution, will be prepared to violate its most fundamental principle, which is the right to freely worship whatever religion you wish to worship.
Paul, I thank you for your help, but before we close, I would like to ask you to tell us when and where we can watch your documentary.
The documentary project I'm making is called This Is a Coup, and it will start with 4 episodes on the 15th of December to the 18th of December, which cover the story of the first Syriza government. These will go out online all over the world at the same time for free. We've done a deal with Laura Poitras, Field of Vision website. She's the Academy Award-winning documentary maker behind Citizen 4. We will go out on that platform. But beyond that, me and the documentary maker, Theopis Skarlatos, are going to continue to use this material to create a series of video projects around it. We want to make a longer 1 hour, 15-minute documentary that runs everything together. And we have a very strong archive of testimony interviews from 4 key politicians, some of which Greeks will have never seen before: Varoufakis, Sakalatos, Ms. Konstantopoulou, and Mr. Tsipras, who we interviewed very recently. So we are going to put that material out when the main story has been told. So watch out.
Paul, thank you very much. This was Paul Mason from England, and thank you for watching us.